My daughter demanded my late husband's ring. When I refused, my MIL turned her against me. So I cancelled the wedding funds. Hello, Reddit. I need some advice on a tricky situation I'm caught up in with my daughter and my mother-in-law. For privacy reasons, I'll be using fake names. My daughter, Leah, is 25, and my mother-in-law, Alice, is 72. As for me, I'm 48 years old, and 4 years ago, I lost my husband to cardiac arrest. He and I were high school sweethearts, together for 28 years, married for 22. I never thought I'd have to navigate life without him, but as they say, life goes on. Right now, though, I'm dealing with a pretty tough issue, one that revolves around the wedding ring my husband gave me all those years ago. Leah recently got engaged to her boyfriend of 3 years, and she wants me to hand over my wedding ring. She's always thought it was beautiful, which, of course, it is, and she believes it should be treated as a family heirloom. The problem is, I don't agree. As far as I'm concerned, that ring belongs with me. It's only been 4 years since my husband passed, and I'm just not ready to part with it. Truth be told, I don't think I'd ever be willing to give it up, no matter how much time goes by. For me, it's not just a piece of jewelry, it represents something much deeper, and I don't think Leah really understands that. And now, because of this, we've found ourselves in a full-blown disagreement. She sees me as selfish for not letting her have it, and Alice has taken her side completely. We've been arguing about this ever since Leah first asked me for the ring and I said no. That day, she threw a huge tantrum, and not long after, she got Alice involved. Ever since then, things have been tense between us. A few days ago, I finally reached my breaking point. I had originally planned to cover all of the wedding expenses that the bride's family was responsible for, but after feeling completely disrespected by both Leah and Alice, I decided to pull my support entirely. And since Alice had been especially awful toward me throughout all of this, I picked up the phone, called her directly, and told her that if she wanted to act like Leah's biggest champion, she could foot the bill instead. That was a few days ago, and in that time, I hadn't heard a word from either of them. But yesterday, Leah showed up at my house, desperate to change my mind. It turns out that the venue she and her fiancé had picked requires a down payment, and if they don't come up with the money soon, they'll lose the reservation. Now, she needs my help, but I don't know if I should give it. Edit. For those wondering, I only wear my wedding ring on special occasions. I own and run a bakery, so my hands are always in use. Even when my husband was alive, I rarely wore the ring because I didn't want to get it dirty or risk losing it. It's a stunning diamond ring set on a platinum band, and it's worth quite a lot. Because of that, I usually keep it stored safely and only bring it out on special days. That's part of Leah's argument. She thinks that since I barely wear it, I should just give it to her. But I've tried over and over again to explain to her that it's not about how often I wear it, it's about what the ring represents. As long as I have it, I can still honor my marriage, even if it's just by wearing it on rare occasions. If I give it away, I lose that connection. While I do like the idea of turning it into a family heirloom, I'm just not ready to let it go, not yet. Maybe one day, I'll reach a point where I can part with it, but that time isn't now. I can at least understand Leah's perspective, even if I don't agree. What I can't wrap my head around is why Alice thinks she has any say in this. When she first sided with Leah, she told me that since the ring was originally bought with her husband's money, she has a right to decide what happens to it. And technically, she's right, the ring was paid for by my father-in-law. My husband and I got married young, and at the time, he couldn't afford such an expensive ring, so his father helped him buy it. But as far as I'm concerned, once we got married, that ring became mine, and I'm the only one who gets to decide what happens to it. That said, I can't say I'm surprised Alice is acting this way. She never liked me. She tolerated me, but from the moment my husband and I started dating back in high school, she never approved of our relationship. What made it worse was that my husband didn't care about her opinion, and neither did I. Even my father-in-law had no problem with us, it was only Alice who had an issue. And now, I have a feeling she's using this situation to try and drive a wedge between me and Leah. I don't know what she thinks she's going to gain from this, but I do know one thing, she's certainly not making things any easier for herself or for Leah. Because in the end, they had to come back to me for help anyway. Alice was never going to cover the wedding costs, and Leah must have realized that the hard way. I hope this clears things up. Update 1. Hey, Reddit. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. This was my first time posting, and I truly appreciate all the kind words and advice. It's been a week since Leah came to me, asking for help with the venue costs. And in the end, I decided to help her out. After reading through all your comments, I saw that most of you agreed that I wouldn't be in the wrong if I chose not to help Leah out. And honestly, a part of me considered standing firm on that. But at the end of the day, Leah is my daughter, and we've always had a strong bond. This was the first real, big fight we've ever had, and I didn't want something like this, something that, in the grand scheme of things, might be petty, to drive a wedge between us. I know for a fact that my husband wouldn't have wanted that. So, in the end, I decided to step up and help her. That said, I did set one condition. I told Leah that I didn't want her to have any more contact with Alice. Normally, I wouldn't make a demand like that because that's just not the kind of person I am. But it's become painfully clear that Alice has been doing everything in her power to manipulate Leah and turn her against me. Like I said, Leah and I have always had a solid relationship. Sure, we've had our share of disagreements, but nothing like this. I guess Alice saw the potential for this fight over the ring to escalate, and she took full advantage of it. If I hadn't pulled my financial support from the wedding when I did, I really think she might have succeeded in driving a permanent wedge between us. Alice lives with my brother-in-law, my husband's older brother, and his family. They're the ones who take care of her financially, so she doesn't have much money of her own. That's why she couldn't step in and help pay for the wedding, though I wouldn't put it past her to have done so if she could. If she had the means, I honestly believe she would have covered the costs just to keep Leah from talking to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not placing all the blame on Alice. Leah is a grown woman, and she should be able to think for herself. But at the same time, she's still young and, in some ways, impressionable. So, I'm trying to be understanding. That said, it does sting to think that if she hadn't needed help covering the venue costs, she might not have reached out to me at all. But I'm choosing not to dwell on that. She's getting married soon, and I'd rather focus on moving forward. Leah and her fiancé are good people, I know that. And that's why I offered to help with the wedding in the first place. His family isn't in the best financial position, so they weren't going to be able to contribute much. I had agreed to help with the costs that traditionally fall on the bride's side, while they planned to handle the rest on their own. So, when it came down to it, I wasn't about to go back on my word just because of one mistake. She's my daughter, my only child, and I can find it in my heart to forgive her. The only thing I asked in return was for her to distance herself from Alice, because I truly believe that woman is a toxic influence. When I told Leah this, she was a little surprised, but she agreed to try and limit her time with Alice. Ever since Alice started siding with her over the ring, they had been spending more time together, bonding over how much they missed my husband. And while I can understand that, Leah also admitted that Alice played a major role in escalating our fight. She told me outright that Alice had been pushing her to see me as the villain, making the situation bigger than it ever needed to be. It was Alice who told her I was being selfish, that I cared more about a ring than I did about my own daughter. She even went so far as to suggest that Leah cut me out of her life altogether if she wanted a peaceful wedding, warning her that I would try to control everything just like I supposedly controlled my husband. That couldn't be further from the truth. I have no idea why she would say something like that, but at this point, it's clear to me that if I want to preserve my relationship with Leah, I need to make sure Alice isn't able to poison it any further. Anyway, that's where things stand for now. If anything else happens, I'll keep you all updated. Thanks for reading. Update 2. Hey, Reddit. Just wanted to give you all an update. Leah and her fiancé were able to secure their venue last week after I helped them with the deposit, and we're working on repairing our relationship. I forgot to mention this in my last update, but Leah has apologized to me multiple times for how she acted throughout this whole ordeal. She told me that, looking back, she realizes she was the one being selfish by not considering what the ring actually meant to me. I can't tell you how relieved I was to hear that. The last thing I wanted was to keep fighting with her. She's my daughter, and I love her. All I ever wanted was to be there for her on her big day, and now that we've put this behind us, I can finally do that. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Alice. She is not happy about the fact that Leah has distanced herself from her. In fact, ever since Leah stopped seeing her, Alice has been throwing a fit about it, trying to make a whole scene. For as long as my daughter has been alive, I've never had an issue with her spending time with Alice. No matter what personal problems I had with my mother-in-law, I never wanted to deprive Leah of her family, even if that meant letting her have a relationship with Alice. And to be fair, Alice had never done anything quite like this before. Sure, she never liked me, but she'd never outright tried to turn my own child against me, at least, not so blatantly. But after everything I learned in my last update, the way she deliberately painted me as the villain, the way she pushed Leah to cut me out of her life, I knew I had to draw the line. I genuinely don't think I did anything wrong, so I honestly can't understand why Alice is so upset. But apparently, she's determined to drag other people into this because, since I blocked her, she's now gotten my brother-in-law involved. Out of nowhere, I got a text from him saying that I needed to unblock Alice so we could clear the air and have a discussion about everything that's been going on. According to her, I had no right to ruin the relationship she was trying to build with Leah. She even pulled the whole "my son wouldn't have wanted this for us" card, which I found pretty ironic, because if we're being honest, she is the one who started all of this. And I'm fairly certain that my husband wouldn't have wanted any of this mess either. Now, I have no bad blood with my brother-in-law, and the last thing I want is to get into a fight with him too. So, I kept my response short and respectful. I told him that I appreciate him, and that's exactly why I don't think it would be a good idea for him to get mixed up in this petty feud. I also pointed out that, deep down, he probably knows that his mother is in the wrong here. His response? He admitted that he didn't want to get involved either. But Alice had been non-stop complaining about how I was ruining her bond with Leah, and since he had no clue what was actually going on, he had just followed her instructions and sent me the message she told him to send. He told me he respects me too, and because he doesn't want to be dragged into this drama any further, he actually suggested that I keep Alice blocked just so she wouldn't keep using him as her messenger. And honestly, I get it. Alice lives with him, and I imagine it's exhausting for him to have to listen to her constant complaints. He can't just throw her out, she's his mother, after all. And I'm sure that, no matter how difficult she is now, they must have had a good relationship at some point, or maybe they still do. So, I can see why he felt obligated to step in when she asked him to. That's part of why I ultimately decided to unblock Alice. I figured it was time to hash things out once and for all. I didn't want to keep dragging this out, and I certainly didn't want more unnecessary fights. For years, I bit my tongue and kept the peace because I didn't want to force my husband to choose between his wife and his mother. Back then, it was just snide remarks and passive-aggressive digs, nothing serious enough to make a big deal over. But this? This was different. She took it to another level by inserting herself into a situation that had nothing to do with her, stirring up drama, and trying to turn my own daughter against me. And since she was so eager for a fight, I figured I might as well give her one. The second I unblocked her, I called her up. She picked up, and before she could even get a word in, I let her have it. I didn't hold back. I had been saving up years of frustration, and once I started talking, it all just poured out. She tried interrupting me a few times, but I wasn't about to let her steamroll me. I just kept talking right over her until she went completely silent. I laid it all out. I told her that for years, she treated me poorly, and I put up with it, for my husband's sake, and later, for my daughter's. I reminded her that I am not a confrontational person, which is why she got away with her behavior for so long. But this time, she crossed the line. I called her out for badmouthing me to Leah, trying to manipulate her and make me look like the villain, all because of a ring. I told her she was an opportunist who saw our mother-daughter disagreement as a chance to push me out of Leah's life. And now that it had all backfired on her, she had no one to blame but herself. Because, at the end of the day, Leah is a grown woman who makes her own choices. I may have guided her, but she was the one who ultimately decided to cut her grandmother off. If Alice was looking for someone to blame, she needed to take a good, hard look in the mirror. When I was finished, Alice tried to defend herself. She claimed she never meant to ruin my relationship with Leah, which was, of course, a blatant lie. I had already heard from Leah exactly what she had been saying behind my back. Then, she tried another tactic. She told me that the real reason she never liked me was because I was controlling and had always treated her son like my puppet. She insisted that, as his mother, she only ever wanted what was best for him, and that was why she never approved of me. Honestly? That was a low blow. Not just because it was completely untrue, but because she kept dragging my late husband into this to justify her own nasty behavior. And I refused to dignify that with an argument. Instead, I calmly told her that if she had only been looking out for her son, then she should understand why I'm doing the same for my child. And that's exactly why I believe it's best that she and Leah don't have a relationship anymore. That must have thrown her off because she started stumbling over her words. And when she couldn't come up with a real response, she resorted to cursing me out. That was my cue to end the conversation. Because when someone starts throwing insults, it just means they've run out of valid points. At that moment, I knew I was done. I had given her a chance to speak her piece, and she blew it. She had nothing to back herself up with, and now, she couldn't say that I hadn't given her the opportunity. So, I hung up and blocked her again. And now, I really hope she stays out of my life, because I am exhausted from dealing with this nonsense. Update 3. Hey, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks since my last conversation, or, rather, my fight with Alice. And since then? She hasn't bothered me. But today, Alice decided to take things a step further. She showed up at my house, completely uninvited. And, of course, she picked the worst possible time to do it. We were in the middle of dinner, not just Leah and me, but her fiancé and his family were over as well. With the wedding just 6 months away, we had all gathered to mark the occasion and enjoy a nice meal together. Somehow, Alice must have had some kind of sixth sense because, right as we were about to serve dessert, the doorbell rang. When I peeked outside and saw her standing there, I immediately knew this was going to be a problem. So, I cracked the door open just slightly, trying to keep things as low-key as possible. I told her that now wasn't a good time and that if she had any respect for this family or its reputation, she should leave before causing a scene. But if there was ever any doubt that Alice didn't care about keeping the peace, she erased it right then and there. Instead of walking away, she took it as her cue to start screaming at me right on my doorstep, for the entire neighborhood to hear. She accused me of deliberately cutting her off from Leah, insisting that this had been my plan all along. She ranted about how she had waited long enough and that if I hadn't felt even an ounce of guilt over the past few weeks, then it just confirmed everything she had always believed about me. According to her, I was controlling and manipulative, just as I had been with her son. And now, she was not going to stand by and let me do the same thing to Leah. She wasn't going to allow her granddaughter to suffer the same emotional distress that, in her mind, my husband had gone through because of me. And that is where I lost my patience. This was probably the 100th time she had dragged my late husband into this, using his name as a weapon to take cheap shots at me. And I was done. My husband had been happy with me, we had been happy together. I had no idea why she refused to believe that, but I was sick of her constantly painting me as the villain, especially when I knew that everyone inside Leah, her fiancé, and his entire family could hear every single word she was yelling. So, I made a split-second decision. I threw the door open wide and invited her in. If she wanted to air our dirty laundry so badly, fine. We were going to do it right in front of Leah, in front of everyone. The second we stepped inside, the entire room shifted. You could feel the discomfort hanging in the air, everyone was visibly uneasy. But I didn't care. I was done being made to look like the bad guy. I turned to Alice and, in front of everyone, I owned up to the fact that, yes, I had asked Leah to keep her distance from her grandmother. But I made it clear that it wasn't because I wanted to cut them off for no reason, it was because I knew what Alice had been doing. She had been trying to manipulate Leah, using our fight as leverage to turn her against me. And that's why I had told Leah to be cautious. But here's the thing, I never forced Leah to agree. She made that choice herself. And then, without me even asking her to, Leah backed me up. She admitted, in front of everyone, that she had been a little slow to realize it, but she now saw the truth. Alice had absolutely been trying to turn her against me. She even repeated some of the things Alice had said to her, the same things that had planted doubt in her mind back when we weren't speaking. And with Leah saying all of this out loud, Alice had no way to deny it. She couldn't twist it or make excuses, because it wasn't coming from me, it was coming from Leah herself. But instead of apologizing or owning up to it, Alice just doubled down. She went right back to claiming that she was only trying to protect Leah, to stop her from being controlled for the rest of her life. But then she threw up her hands and said that if this was what Leah wanted, then she had nothing more to say. And that's when I decided to say my piece. I looked her right in the eye and told her, once and for all, that my husband had been perfectly happy with me. I had never controlled him, never manipulated him. The only reason she thought I had was because she refused to believe that her son could be truly happy with someone she didn't approve of. But that was her problem. And unfortunately for her, this was the reality, one she could either accept or walk away from. Because I was done dealing with her drama. And now that my husband was gone, there was no reason for her to be in my life. If she wanted to stay in touch with Leah, she could have. But Leah made the choice on her own to cut ties. That was her decision, and Alice had no one to blame but herself. That must have hit a nerve because Alice opened her mouth to argue again, but before she could get a word out, Leah stopped her. Leah looked her grandmother in the eye and told her, point blank, that she was embarrassing herself. And if there was anyone in this family who was actually controlling and manipulative, it wasn't me, it was her. That was the final straw. Alice completely lost it. She started screaming at all of us, spewing insults, calling us all sorts of names. Alice completely lost control. She started shouting all kinds of insults, cursing at us, and making a total spectacle of herself. At that point, I had no choice, I had to call my brother-in-law to come and get her. He arrived within minutes, but in those few moments, we were stuck listening to her relentless screaming. Leah, however, didn't back down. She kept arguing with Alice, and I think it was because she had finally seen her grandmother for who she truly was. It must have hit her hard realizing that she had almost let this woman manipulate her into turning against me. When my brother-in-law got there, we learned that Alice hadn't even told anyone at home where she was going. She had lied, saying she was visiting a friend, because she knew that if she had admitted she was coming here to stir up trouble, they wouldn't have let her leave. They probably would have talked her down and convinced her to stay put. My brother-in-law was visibly upset, and I don't blame him. He apologized to both me and Leah, and I could see how embarrassed he was. I felt for him because no matter how much Alice humiliated him, he was the one who still had to live with her, deal with her, put up with her tantrums. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. All I could do was wish him luck, because he was going to need it. Honestly, it was a terrible night. But if there was one good thing that came out of it, it was that Leah finally got to see her grandmother's true colors for herself. She was more apologetic than ever, realizing how wrong she had been to take Alice's side in the first place. After dinner, as everyone was leaving, Leah hung back for a few extra minutes to talk to me privately. She told me she was truly sorry for everything, for how she had acted, for how she had let herself be influenced, and for the way she had treated me. She admitted that an apology alone wouldn't erase everything, but she wanted me to know that she would do better. She promised that moving forward, she wouldn't let herself get carried away like that again. She also admitted something else: she had been acting like a bridezilla. And it wasn't just me who had noticed, her fiancé and her friends had also called her out on it, which is what finally made her see things clearly. She acknowledged that, yes, a part of why she came running back to me was because she needed help with the wedding venue deposit. But even beyond that, she had already been planning to apologize. We had a real, honest heart-to-heart that night. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had truly cleared the air. After everything that had happened, I was just relieved to have my daughter back. Now, all I could hope for was that the wedding went smoothly. Update 4. Hello, Reddit. My daughter got married this week. And I don't think I've felt this happy in a long time. Leah was absolutely stunning as a bride. Seeing her walk down the aisle, looking so radiant and joyful, made all the stress, all the fights, all the heartache we had gone through completely worth it. And as a small gesture of love, I decided to let her wear my ring for the wedding. It was her something borrowed. After the ceremony, she returned it to me, but when I finally feel ready to part with it, I know I'll give it to her for good. Because yes, one day, that ring will be a family heirloom. But on my terms, when I am ready. The wedding itself was beautiful. It was full of love, laughter, and emotional moments that I'll treasure forever. And, of course, one thing that made it even better? Alice was not in attendance. Ever since our last confrontation 6 months ago, she hasn't reached out to me, and I couldn't be happier about that. My brother-in-law did attend though, along with his family, because we never had an issue with him. He told me that Alice was furious about not receiving an invitation, but of course, she still blames me for that. In her mind, I'm the horrible woman who turned her granddaughter against her and controlled everything. But the truth is, Leah made that decision herself. She didn't want Alice at her wedding. She didn't want that negativity on her special day. And, honestly, there is no force in the world that could ever convince Alice that she is the real problem here. She will always see herself as the victim, no matter what. But you know what? That's not my problem anymore. She can believe whatever she wants to believe. It doesn't affect me anymore. All I care about is that my daughter is happy, that our relationship is stronger than ever, and that we made it through all of this together. And in the end, that's all that really matters.